So analytic is a more assertive energy. It's more of I almost think of it as like a push out. Now, this is different than extroversion. Extroversion is just being like aware and engaged with the outside world, right? It's like, oh, this is very interesting. All these things that are not inside of me, right? All of these things that are surrounding me in the outside world.
Yeah.
Introversion is the opposite. It's like, oh, everything inside of the confines of my skin is like super interesting, right?
Yeah.
And it's like the thing that captures your attention. Is it inner world or outer world focused? This is a slightly different concept. This is more about whether or not something is asserting itself or it's a more receptive energy. The analytic is a more assertive energy. So even if it's introverted, let's take, for example, just to illustrate the point, introverted feeling or authenticity. We think of it as like understanding what you like, your preferences, your values, a little bit of your conscience, like the things that make you feel certain ways. And when you end up, thinking that something's super important, you can either keep it inside or you can start telling everybody that this thing is super important, right? So even though it was sourced in an introverted place, you can still be assertive about the conclusions you came to inside of yourself. So this is more about what you're going to do with the conclusions. What are you going to do with what's coming up for you? So it's not introversion and extroversion. It's assertion, right? I'm going to now push it out to assert this in the world, or I'm going to have a more receptive, receiving quality. And this can get kind of confusing when you're talking about an extroverted function that is receptive, right? Or an introverted function that is assertive. It gets kind of shady there. It gets kind of confusing.
I think there's the word intentionality or I guess initiative is another word that could be used, like initiative energy versus kind of waiting and receptive energy for it to come this direction.
Right, like
the
passive.
Passive, maybe initiative. So initiative is another word that might help if you're having trouble latching onto this, like you're getting it confused with extroverted, introvert. I think that can be a language that can help there.
And I also think of it in terms of things like there's a form of meditation that has you focusing like on single points on maybe like an imperfection in the wall. And so you're hyper focused on a single point. And that's what's taking all of your time, all of your focus and attention. That would be more of sort of an assertive energy.
You have
right?
blinders on almost.
That's right. Yeah, you're like really hyper focused. And then there's a form of meditation called Shambhala. I think we did a podcast on it a million years ago. But we interviewed somebody who does Shambhala meditation, and it's the exact opposite. As opposed to being hyper-focused on a single point, you actually intentionally lid your eyes, and you try to take in as much peripheral as you possibly can. And so you're taking in a much, much, much bigger picture, but you can't see anything very clearly. And so I think of the analytic energy as being that hyper-focused on a single point. That's why it's kind of almost like assertive, right? It's like it's asserting attention to a single point.
Yeah. Versus
a holistic energy would be more like the Shambhala, which is you're receiving more information. It's a broader perspective, a broader view, but you're not seeing anything with very much specificity.
Yeah.
So that might be a little easier for understanding than assertive, receptive.
I'm going to suggest that we're going to go through a list here, compare and contrast. I think that's going to land it.
I think so too.
For you listening or watching right now. So, I mean, let's just look at, the analytic style or energy is going to be more goal focused, seeking a desired outcome, and it's going to be filtering out distractions. So this is like goals, it's focal point, like you said. The holistic energy is going to be more open-ended. It's seeking input and reflecting on data without filters while attending patiently with curiosity to the flow of the process. So this is like already we're seeing more goal-focused versus kind of just letting things kind of happen and then seeing what emerges and flows into the frame.
Right, exactly. So the analytic is like, it tends to look like it has more clarity. It tends to look like it has more confidence. It's more goal-focused. And so it looks like it's a person on a mission a little bit more, like the energy itself. Yeah. Like you said, as opposed to the more open, curious, sort of emergent energy. It also, the analytic has a top-down approach, whereas the holistic tends to have a bottom-up approach. And you're more aware, like you understand that top-down concept and bottom-up concept a little bit better than I do. I have a tendency to struggle with the idea, probably because I'm a bottom-up. So what do you think of when you think of something being top-down?
Well, I think of it kind of having a I think it's more of having a ready-made solution or an idea of how it needs to be, that you're looking for application of it. Like you're not looking to build the solution as you go through and find the problems and solve them. It's almost like you have the solution and you're looking for problems to apply it to.
Right. Yes.
Like I've got the hammer. Where's the nail?
Right.
Show me the nail. I've got the hammer.
Yes.
I think that's more of a top-down approach.
Yep.
Whereas I think bottom up is it's like, well, what are we working with? We're working with nails, screws. I'll get the tool that's appropriate for the thing that I'm dealing with here.
More of a discovery process.
Yeah. And so I think that's the difference in my mind, top down.
Fantastic. Thank you for explaining that, because I'm always like, what does it mean top down? So Analytic is more top down.
Yeah.
Right. You have the solution. You have the hammer. You're looking for the nail. And the holistic is more of a, like you said, what are we working with? Are we working with hammers and nails and screws or whatever? So it tends to be a little bit more open. The analytic style has a tendency to consider things in a more complex way, right? It almost is like thinker energy, almost like. This is why it makes it so complicated. But it brings in what's most relevant. It brings in viewpoints that will be helpful, and it excludes all the ones that will not be.
I love how you interpret thinking as complex, and like as if emotions and motivations and all those things are, those are really simple. There's no complexity there. So it's almost like thinking, complex like thinking.
Okay, you got me. Fair enough. My bias is showing. You're right. My apologies. Actually, to be fair, feeling is like the most complex thing that I can think of.
Certainly. I just thought it was funny that you're...
I meant in terms of problem solving.
Sure. Right. I get your intent, but I just thought it was funny how even in the midst, even knowing as much as we know, our biases still come through in this.
You called it. All right. Okay, yes. They consider situations in a complex way, like all of the functions can be, including feeling. And not just thinking. That's the analytic style. The holistic style tends to be more of a, it's like it's not looking for it's not looking for just the solutions and removing all of the irrelevant elements. It's bringing all the stuff in. Again, it's like that Shambhala, and it's bringing all the things in and kind of like taking them as they come, and that includes things that might seem irrelevant to other people, but to a holistic mind, it's like, well, maybe that's relevant. So again, it's bringing in that periphery. The analytic style tends to focus on known problems, and the holistic style tends to try to find novel solutions.
Yeah.
Right? Analytic also tends to be a little bit more visual, and holistic tends to be more auditory.
Yeah.
So what they're paying attention to with like visual, it's like more like people's body language, visual cues, finding visual solutions, right?
Well, I think visual information is immediate, and it's like holistic. Weirdly enough, it's analytic, but it's like you get a ton of information like right now, a snapshot. As a picture's worth 1,000 words. Right. Whereas sound, audio, words, it's like the story unfolding over a timeline. You've got to wait for the word to, every word has to come after the next word, and you're waiting. You're being patient to absorb it in real time through a timeline. Yep. Whereas like a snapshot can happen in a moment.
Yes.
And so I think that's the difference too, is probably the speed at which the information wants to be processed.
Yep.
So by the way, as we're going through this, just be tuning into yourself. Like, we're not even talking about specific function or type right now. Which one of these do you already lean toward? As you're like reflecting, are you more holistic in nature? Like, would you call yourself more of a holistic person, more receptive, more diffused, more open? Or are you more analytic? You're more assertive, more focused, more deliberate, faster. So just kind of get a sense of where you're showing up too.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I'd add to the auditory, I think you're totally dead right about that. The visual is faster. I think auditory, unlike the visual that is more focused on body language and that sort of thing, auditory is more focused on tonality and tends to think in a more narrative way.
Yeah.
Right. There is a lot more attention in the analytic to content, facts, rules, methods, numbers, deduction. That is more thinker.
Yeah. There you go.
Regardless of the function
I'll
it's
throw you that
associated
bone.
with.
It's fine.
Whereas the holistic style tends to be more about tones and intentions and ethics, artistry, emotional impact, expressiveness, humor and metaphor. So in this way, an analytic energy will almost mimic a thinker energy, and a holistic energy will mimic a feeler energy.
So this proves not proves. That's the wrong word. This is illustrating. There you go. It's illustrating what we talked about earlier of like, that can't be an ENTJ. How many times have you been accused, Antonia, of being like an ESFJ when somebody's watching our YouTube videos?
Yeah.
Or I've never seen any, like ENTP coming from her. That can't be her.
That can't be.
She's got to be a feeler. But I would say you're more holistic, like overall, not just your functions, but you have more of a holistic style. And for me, I have a much more analytic style, even though I'm a feeler, which I have a lot of feeling, don't get me wrong, but I tend to be analytic and driven and focused and on it and high speeds and all this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think people get like I've been called an INFJ, like, a few preferences, but INFJ, it's weirdly enough, I don't know, maybe it's because of the way I'm bringing out thinking, or I don't know what it is.
I don't know. Yeah.
ENFJ, these kinds of like more assertive, dominant kind of styles of like, judger style energy in the world, whatever.
Yeah. You know who never questions whether or not we're both ENPs? The people who work with us.
Oh yeah.
None of our staff
they
believes
lament it.
Oh yeah.
They don't question it. They just like, they've written books about the trauma of it.
Yeah. I'm sure volumes have been written. And I think, the cat's out of the bag. I'm a more holistic type, right? I favor the holistic energy.
Oh, you were waiting. You were holding that back?
No, I wasn't.
As a surprise?
No, I wasn't. But you said it. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to roll. I don't know if that's entirely natural to me. I just know that it was trained into me.
Yeah.
And I think it's the result of being born into and raised in a very fundamentalist cultish religion. That was like basically anytime I asserted anything, I got my hand slapped.
Yeah.
So it was a survival strategy to become real chill, real holistic, real lean back. Right? It's like, okay, whatever. Like, I'm just going to be curious. I'm just going to open myself up and just see what happens next. And actually getting into analytic energy, which is something that I'm trying to train myself to do more and more. It's a real struggle for me. It's very difficult for me to get into that energy because I've been so trained out of it. Yeah. So I think a part of this is training. Like whether or not we favor an analytic or holistic bent, I think is part of the nurture component of type. I do think there was a more natural assertive energy in me when I was younger, and it just got beaten out of me basically. And I don't think that's uncommon. I think that's one of the challenges that women talk about a lot is that I don't know if they know they're saying this, but the language I hear is we're all trained to be holistic, and men get to be analytic. And
men are, I think, trained to be analytic.
Yeah.
If you're not, that you get a lot of pressure to be so.
You got it. Yep.
Same way as women getting trained out of it.
Yeah. And I think this is part of the like sort of the gender stereotypes and that sort of thing. And I think men sometimes lament that they can't be holistic, and women lament, or you have a more holistic man who, is there a place for me? Or a more analytic woman, is there a place for me? Right. And so if we're not the thing that is the expectation, the people who are the expectation are lamenting that they're not the opposite. And the people who are the opposite are lamenting that they're not the expectation, right? Yeah. So yeah, we all have problems. But that said, not to get off on too many rabbit trails when we're still in the middle of the list, but let's go back to the analytic versus
me,
holistic.
I'm a feeler. I'm trying to apply it to the personal, like how we show up, not just a list of data. But let's go back to the list of data because I'm also interested in this.
Yep.
Let's go.
So analytic styles are more literal thinkers. So they tend to be more literal, even if they're intuitive preferenced, right? Yeah. And so there's going to be a limit to their thinking and their ideas to the current context specified. So they're not going to bring a bunch of stuff in, right? They're literal. So they're like, okay, here's the thing that I'm talking about. Here's the challenge that I'm working on. And again, other stuff will be shut out. Versus holistic is a more figurative style of thinking.
Yeah.
And that means that there's going to be, they're going to be more likely to limit the scenario, not to the context, but more to their identity, more to values, and be more metaphorical in the way that they're looking at things. Analytic styles are more comfortable working in hierarchies.
Yeah.
Holistic has a tendency to prefer a more egalitarian way.
More flat organization. Mm-hmm. We're all in this together kind of energy.
Yep, you got it. Analytic styles are more, they tend to be blind to their biases, including the fact that they're analytic, right? So one of the disadvantages to the analytic style is that they're less aware of their biases. And I think the holistic style is a little bit more aware of biases.
Yeah.
Right. But they might not be, Dario says they might not be sufficiently empowered or confident to make a choice or a change, right? So they're more aware that they are holistic, that they tend to be receptive, and that they might need more analytic energy, but it's harder for them to do it.
Yeah.
I experience that all the time. Whereas the analytic is more unaware of the bias, but and that gives them a confidence. That's part of the confidence that comes from this. But I suspect that once they realize it, I have a feeling that it might be a little easier to to enter the holistic energy.
Yeah. And I think that's important. I want to lay that down right now as we're going, and we'll unpack this later. Is these are not static like personality types.
Mm-hmm.
You have one of these energies that this is trainable. This is more nurture than nature. And I think you can train yourself to lean into the other energy. If you're more holistic, you can train yourself. And we have the tools of the functions themselves, which we'll talk about in a moment and through the whole series. There's actual ways to do that. Like there's exercises. In fact, I think soon Dario is going to bring some content out where he's going to talk about breath work that can change our state and move us into the energies. So there's all sorts of things we can do to flex and flow with.